Homage to the Triple Gem. So I was asked a question on the last YouTube video we did about fear in the Buddha's teachings, especially when one is thinking about renunciation. So the question was, do you ever feel fear from what the Buddha teaches? How long has this been going on? And how many lives has this been picking up speed? How many times has it slowed but never fully stopped, leading on to suffering for a long time? I suppose that is the pessimistic view. One could also hold that the ball has been slowing for a long time, and this life, during a time of a Buddha's dispensation, is one of the few opportunities to progress quickly towards the goal of the holy life. But then, that is a lot of pressure, to wonder about what might happen if this opportunity is not taken advantage of, to throw it away for some cheap pleasure. Let's see here. And we have, I tend to find that when reading the Pali canon, existential anxiety increases and doesn't decrease. Perhaps this is a common symptom for Westerners who read much and practice little. There's a lot of fear when I read about how the Buddha advises his monks to practice like their head is on fire, or to view sensory pleasure as hot coals, then to reflect on how I am not living or practicing like that. It is cognitive dissonance. Curious what you think, or if you have seen similar sentiments repeated in others. So a little bit of a paraphrase there. Some of that message was cut off, but I think everybody gets the gist. So fear of renunciation is a part of practicing, and it can be something that arises frequently for people in their practice. I remember as a young man, I was practicing, and I originally started a practice actually for relatively worldly ends. I mean, I was inspired by the Buddha's teachings, and I believed that the goal was real, but didn't really have an idea that I actually wanted to be a monk per se. And I kind of wanted to have better relationships. There was a number of goals, like just normal worldly goals that I wanted in my life. I wanted to do better at school. I wanted to go to university, and thought that I'd like to live that way, being a good Buddhist. And was just doing this and practicing, and a number of things came up, and one thing led to another. I ended up living actually in a Zen temple during university and taking their part-time priest program while at the same time going to school. And sometimes you'll hear about renunciation as if it's this thing where you kind of are totally disgusted with something, and so you give it up easily. But it doesn't always work out that way. Actually, in my case, I really loved school. I mean, I loved my program. I was a business student, really enjoyed my program, my business program, really liked the people who I was going to school with, and felt that was, possibly the best time of my life up until that point, being there in university. But I noticed that there was this competition between the happiness that I was getting from my practice and the happiness that I was getting from school, or from the life that I was attempting to build by getting an education. And so as time went on, kind of supplementing my school life with my meditation, trying to make my lay life better, there was this one time, as far as I remember, I went on this retreat, and after the retreat I realized I'm getting more happiness from meditation than I am from being in school. So rather than meditation just being a support for the happiness I was trying to get from my lay life, I realized that I was actually getting, it was essentially more happiness from my practice of meditation than there was from being in school, from doing all these other things. So those kind of ideas, those kind of insights can come almost in like a flash, and they can be very frightening. So actually the fact of the matter is I was frightened by the implications of that. And especially the implication that I would have to possibly leave school, possibly have to give everything up that I'd been working really hard to build for a number of years, and step into a future that was basically almost completely uncertain. I had no idea where I was going to end up, no idea what was going to happen, or where I was going to go, or how I was going to go about it. So one thing led to another, and eventually I realized that if I was going to want to progress in my meditation, I would have to give up school. So those kind of choices, when one is looking at the things that one has built in one's life and realizes that there may be a fork in the road, then it can create a lot of fear, it can create a lot of anxiety. There's different ways that one can deal with this. I mean, one of them is that some people actually are not really that anxious or fearful or afraid or whatever it might be of changes in their life that they haven't planned. For people who like to plan, who like to make schedules, who have a kind of 5-year plan, 10-year plan, 20-year plan, 30-year plan for their life, then an abrupt change in that can be very frightening, can be very scary. So for myself, I was kind of a planner. So it's just a natural inclination some people have. They kind of like to have clear ideas and clear goals, and I mean that fits in well with business. But there's an aspect of the spiritual life, there's an aspect of the holy life that is completely unplannable, and that requires faith. So there is this element in practice, this ability to let go and kind of just kind of go with the flow. These people who just kind of go with the flow, they don't really seem to have much fear arise, even when making major life decisions just based on intuition. There was this one girl that I knew when I was a young guy. We dated for about 2 years, and she was really, really good at just going with the flow. Almost never made any plans, and she had this really excellent job as a hairdresser at one of these top salons in Toronto. And I didn't realize how much money hairdressers actually make if they're at a top salon. They make incredible amounts of money. It's huge amounts of money. People are paying like $600 to have their hair colored, or like more than $100 at the time to have their hair cut. So I mean, that was 20 years ago. Maybe that's doubled now. I have no idea. But a really significant amount of money just to take care of their hair. So the hairdressers are making money doing that. So she had landed this remarkably good job out of her hairdressing school. And then one day she, over time she started to have this intuition that she wanted to go to Australia. It's kind of Australia, like why, what makes you want to go to Australia? At the time thinking, I've been to Australia now, it's a lovely place, but being a young guy in Canada at the time, or, herself being a young woman at the time, it's like, what, where is this coming from out of the blue that you want to go to Australia? You don't know any, how many people do you know in Australia? You've grown up here. But she didn't seem to have any trouble making decisions like that, and was just happy to let go of that job, happy to let go of everything and go to Australia. So people who have this kind of non-planning attitude, this attitude of going with the flow, don't tend to meet with this existential fear as much as people who have a planning attitude. Now, of course, there are elements of our practice that planning is important to help bolster them, to help see them through. The ability to set goals, the ability to have clear standards about behavior, clear standards of precepts and morality is really important, and that ties into this planning attitude, for lack of a better word. But this attitude of just going with the flow and going more with the intuitive side when something presents itself and seems like it's been pulled together in a way that's really auspicious, just going for that ability, to cultivate that, is something that can substantially decrease existential anxiety that's associated with practice. So this is actually something that one can practice for, and one can practice not making plans. Just seeing what happens when one goes with the flow. If one goes on a trip, for example, if one might have a teaching engagement or something like this, needs to go to a particular place, rather than try to schedule everything, why not just show up there and see what happens? Just set out and see what happens, see what comes together. And one can try to use one's instincts to hone which direction to go in. This seems to be another ability that these people who go with the flow have. It's not that they're just being blown by the wind, it's that they have a kind of inner compass, an inner instinct, and when certain situations seem to pull themselves together, it seems obvious to them that they should go with it. So that kind of ability is something that can substantially decrease anxiety, because the Dhamma, or not just in Buddhism, but every religion has these stories of people needing to take leaps of faith, and then things just spontaneously coming together, pulling themselves together for it, and even getting like some auspicious signs, you might say, or pointers that this is the right direction to go. So the Dhamma is also like this. There's times in our practice when we feel compelled to do things and we have no idea what's 5 feet in front of us, to say nothing about what's 10 years in front of us, or 5 or 10 or 50 years in front of us. And it requires this ability to trust that the Dhamma will protect us, to trust that we'll find things that are good and that the path will open up for us. And there are certain signs that can present themselves to people that they can intuitively tune into, that this is the right way to go. So for somebody who's developed this intuition, actually not going with that can become scary, because they've seen the consequences and kind of trying to force things down a particular path, and all of a sudden nothing works out. You go with these intuitive paths that, you could say, for lack of a better word, the universe, karma's trying to point you there, you feel this strong sense, strong draw to a particular direction, and you go with that, and things just seem to spontaneously come together. When a person has experienced that enough times in their life, when they practice that frequently enough in their life, then making decisions based on this intuitive faculty can be less scary. So that ties in with another thing, which is this quality of faith. So most people who come to Buddhism in the West are convert Buddhists, actually. I mean, they're not born Buddhists. I mean, they weren't come into the temple when they were 2 years old, like we see in these in Buddhist countries. It's very, very inspiring to see. Here in Sri Lanka, they have these little tiny kids that barely walk, and they're helping their fathers wash the feet of the monks. In Thailand, the mothers, when they when the little kids come to the temple, I mean, they can barely walk sometimes. They kind of push their heads down, like force them to bow, push their heads down to the floor. So that kind of training, early training, is not present for Western convert Buddhists or convert Buddhists from any country that is not Buddhist, and can't say just Western countries. So what it usually means is that people come to Buddhism through the intellect rather than through faith. And they're examining things, they're listening to talks, they're looking at their own life, and they're asking, is this the right path to go? That is one aspect of our practice. It's one kind of faculty, one of the faculties that the Buddha lists, which is discernment, and the most important one. But also very, very important is this faith, this ability to believe, that and first of all, it's usually described that the Tathagata is rightly self-awakened, knower of the worlds, all these excellent qualities of the Buddha. But faith also extends that when one does good actions, good results will come. Just having this kind of faith that that's going to be the case. And this faith is a faculty, having this ability to step into things that are completely unknown with a sense of joy, with a sense that this is the right way to go. One of the ways we can cultivate this faith is actually learning to see the good qualities in other people and learning to follow their instructions. I mean, that's something really counterintuitive to most convert Buddhists who come to Buddhism through skepticism. But this is a quality of faith, learning to believe, this person has a really good qualities. I trust them, I have faith in them, I'm going to follow their instructions. It's one of the really important things that one learns as a monk, as a young monk. I mean, it's not blind faith, you evaluate them too, but also you kind of learn that there's people who know more than me, I should trust them, I should try out what they say and see if it works. That's one way that one can cultivate this. Another aspect of the cultivation of faith, like when one starts to notice these wholesome qualities in other people, it brightens the mind, it lifts the mind up. When one starts to think about the wholesome qualities of the Buddha, it brightens the mind, it lifts the mind up, and it gives the mind this feeling of almost like invincibility to people. That the Christians who cultivated so much faith in Jesus were willing to die. And kind of read about early Christian history in Rome, and they were basically killed. They got thrown to lions, they got all these terrible things happen to them, and they did it willingly out of this faith. So, of course, we all know that faith can be misplaced, it can be misdirected, but this is a power that it has to allow one the ability to step into the unknown, and it comes in part through cultivating the perception of the wholesome, cultivating the perception of trust in the wholesome, that it will lead to a good result. Another aspect that one can cultivate to reduce the fear, the existential anxiety that comes with things just potentially falling away, is actually not to take the Buddha's teachings on renunciation and make them into a kind of guilt trip. It's kind of like, the Buddha, he does teach, if you have these bad qualities, practice like your head is on fire. I mean, there's also other places where he teaches if your mind is in a good place, and you can attend to your thoughts in a much more light way. And there's a balancing aspect that's needed here. So we don't take the Buddha's teachings as like injunctions, his renunciant teachings as injunctions. Like if you don't do these renunciant teachings, it means you're a bad person. It means you're a bad practitioner. And that's not the right way to take the Buddha's teachings on. One needs to view them more like a training. And this is what they are. They're not a moral black and white. The precepts are more of a moral black and white, but these are also called sikkhapadas. They're trainings. And in Buddhism, we're not being judged by necessarily like an overarching God who's doling out punishment because we've displeased him, so we need to feel guilt towards some other being. what it is, the Buddha's teachings focus on cause and effect. So it's like, if you want to get this cause, you have to put the effect into place. So what we're looking at here is more in terms of the Buddha's teachings on renunciation. I mean, if you want to have the higher fruits of the path, eventually you have to renounce. But the Buddha also taught a gradual training. So it doesn't really make sense that, just to think, okay, look at what the Arahants have done, what they've done, and I'm not doing that. I should, I'm a bad Buddhist, I should just jump off and give all that up at once. Actually, as part of our paths, there's a right time to do things and there's a wrong time. And the rightness of this time can be a kind of ripening. So going back to that example with my thinking about giving up school, that was a kind of ripening. It wasn't like I read Buddhism and thought, I'm going to give up everything and become a monk. It was this kind of process where I was trying to practice and trying to get the most out of my meditation practice and carefully evaluating. There was this kind of ripening. It's like, if you want to go further, then this is a fork in the road. I mean, this is what you have to do. So our renunciation doesn't have to be like a sudden jump off a cliff. It can be more like the gradual ripening of a fruit. It can be more like gradually going up the mountain until you come to a road and notice there's a fork. And if you want to keep going up the mountain, you have to take the fork that goes up, not the one that goes down. So practicing in this way can also help to reduce the existential anxiety, the fear that's associated with renunciation in the Buddhist path. We don't have to do it all at once, and we don't have to feel guilty if we do it all at once. We can look at the development of our wholesome qualities, the reduction of our unwholesome qualities right now, and see what it is that's leading to the wholesome, see what it is that's declining the unwholesome, and that's our path forward. That's practicing in this way. This is when we get these intuitions. This is the right way to go, and we should follow it. This is practicing in this way. This is going up the mountain. Sometimes come to these forks in the road spontaneously. I'd better give this up. Now's the right time to do this. It wasn't the right time before. Now it's the right time to do this. So that can be a much more balanced and comfortable way to renounce, and one that's much more fruitful. Not to get into puns, but one when we don't pluck the fruit before it's ripe. We wait till it ripens, and then when we pluck it, it's much easier to pluck. It sometimes even almost drops on its own. The final aspect of renunciation that we can discuss for this video, essentially, that one of the things that can help is actually this faculty, this ability to endure painful feelings. I mean, this is something that gets emphasized quite a lot. Endurance. When I was in Thailand, I was really inspired. This place where there's so many arahants, the teachings that we used to keep hearing over and over again was endure and put forth effort. It was just like you heard endure. They have this word oton, which sounds sounds like enduring. And it was just, you heard that over and over and over again with regards to everything. Endure, 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 endure. And so even using the strategies that we've mentioned above, there's going to be discomfort in regards to renunciation. There's going to be a lot of fear with regards to renunciation, and one has to endure the fear. There's aspects of moving forward in wholesome qualities that can only be accomplished through endurance, essentially. There's no way to get rid of all the painful feeling, reduce it till it's nothing. The painful feeling associated with striving, what the Buddha sometimes may call renunciant grief. The way that one has to deal with that sometimes is to endure it and to see what's at the end of that road. When one takes the fork, see what's beyond the bend. Is it something much better? So that time, actually, when I was thinking about renouncing school the very first time, that insight came up and I got afraid of it. So I kind of pushed it away and I left the temple eventually. So this is crazy. I actually had this thought, it was like a train. It's like, this is the stop I'm getting off at. This is getting a bit weird. Kind of left the temple and went back to, I was a young man at that time. I was in university. I went back to stay at my mother's house. So I was paying rent at this temple and stayed there for about 6 months. But remember feeling this pull that I should go back. And even later, after I did go back, I did end up quitting school, did end up doing all those things. For many, many years afterwards, those 6 months that I didn't go, and some of the decisions that I made, the fear that I had giving into the fear of not renouncing when I should have, in ways that were both minor and more significant. That was a regret that I held for many, many years. Kind of after renouncing, I never, it's not something you really regret, like, I shouldn't have done that. It's kind of regretted very deeply this kind of 6-month period and, these kind of intentions that I had not to renounce and, trying various things not to renounce to get out of this kind of conundrum, that I had regrets for. So it's something very unusual in our practice that sometimes the things that cause us the most fear, they're the way that we should go. And the path can open up for us if we go that way. And we won't regret it. If it's really the genuine deal that the fruit has ripened, it's time for it to drop, then the best thing to do is to let it drop and enjoy the fruits. If we decide we're not going to let the fruit drop, or we're going to turn away and let it fall on the ground and rot, that's something that we'll regret. So at the end of the day, what we should fear more actually than the fear of renunciation is the fear of regretting our life, the fear of regretting losing our opportunity. It was one of the things that I was reading at that time when I was a young monk or a young man thinking about renouncing was a Dhammapada verse, which was just going to paraphrase here, those who fail to acquire wealth and power in their youth or who fail to make their way to the holy life are like big herons beside a dried up old pond, sighing over lost times. Those who fail to gain wealth or power in their youth or who fail to make their way to the holy life lie like arrows misfired from a bow, kind of bewailing their misspent past. It's just kind of a paraphrase here. So reading that, I became kind of freaked out. It's kind of, there's almost nothing, almost nothing that one can fear more than looking back at one's life at the moment of one's death and feeling regret about how one spent one's life. So these intuitions about what one should do, where one should go, how one should practice, what one should give up, they're really worth paying attention to. They're not necessarily going to be something, they have to be fine-tuned, they have to be observed carefully. But when they come in these ways that are really significant, really auspicious, like a flash, they're to be paid attention to. Because if we don't pay attention to them, it can be like somebody who goes under the water and, forgets about something, and then every now and then they come up and kind of come up for the stream remember. That's what it was like when I went back to stay at my mother's house, kind of totally forgot about all my aspirations for a bit, went underneath, and then every now and then it would come up. Luckily, I was able to follow through on that. But if we don't follow through on some of these renunciations, it can be like somebody going under the stream for a long time, coming up, going under the stream for a long time, coming up, and at the end of the stream is a waterfall. And kind of, you fall off of this stream. There's an end to it. And when you're coming to the edge of that waterfall, you come up again and you think, geez, I had all these opportunities and I should have taken the chance to swim towards the shore, but I didn't because I was afraid. That is a terrible thing. And it's something that's genuinely worth being afraid of. So the fear of renunciation is something to be overcome. It's something to be transcended. And we can do this through some of these ways, kind of learning to become somebody who goes with the flow more, more spontaneous, learning to develop this faculty of faith and kind of learning to endure some of the painful feelings that come with renunciation. Because what's around the bend when we take these forks is not a sudden drop-off. It's paths that lead further and further up the mountain. And if we take these paths, then even if we die along the way, we have no cause to regret that. That's a way that we can live our life that we will not feel ashamed of when the time comes for us to pass. And of course, this path leads somewhere. It leads to the top of the mountain. And if one makes it there, then that's the end of the goal. And of course, there's no more regrets and no more sorrows if one reaches that summit. So we can practice renunciation rightly in this way. We can direct our minds rightly in this way for the sake of the higher goal and overcome fear for this sake. Because there's nothing really to fear when all the signs are there. It's leading us to a good place.